The discussion is also taking place in the UK, around the Exeter Chiefs Rugby Club. In the past 2 weeks, nearly 3,000 people have signed a petition led by the campaign Exeter Chiefs for Change.
And the rugby club is looking at possibly dropping its name and badge, the whole imagery actually, which portrays stereotypes about Native Americans.
Fans are at odds over the use of the Native American imagery. An online petition is calling on the club to alter their crest and address other areas of cultural appropriation, including the Big Chief mascot.
It basically reduces this down to a stereotype. There are over 562 tribal, nations throughout the United States. Not every tribal nation uses the headdress. This is very reductionist and homogenizes us as people.
Why is it okay, relatively speaking, to use imagery of native mascots when you wouldn't do that, for example, for people of African descent or other parts of the world? We as a society would not accept that.
Face paint or fake feathers or dress up in any way that they deem to be Native American or do a tomahawk chop or a chant. It's incredibly offensive. It has no semblance at all to Native culture that I see. People are offended by this. They don't like it, and they want it to stop.
The Exeter Chiefs has agreed now to retire their Big Chief mascot out of respect. But you have to say Exeter fans do seem rather divided on this.
Meeting last night, this is the management of Exeter Chiefs to keep the name and logo, despite nearly 4,000 people signing a petition to get them to drop the Native American branding. The club's board met yesterday. They have, though, decided to retire their Big Chief mascot, who is usually at the games.
It's offensive. It's harmful. There's research that's been done around the harmful effects of the imagery, the branding.
The Exeter Chiefs' new mascot has ruffled a few feathers after its unveiling at the weekend. Last year, the club decided to retire the Big Chief mascot because they felt it could be deemed disrespectful. But its replacement has done little to make the issue around the Native American branding go away.
And of course, you may well be aware of the story starting to generate around the Exeter Chiefs with regards to the imaging and how they portray themselves and what they use to promote themselves as Exeter Chiefs.
There are a lot of people that are offended by what we believe is cultural appropriation. We don't for one second believe that Exeter Chiefs are a club with any particular views on this. And, it's just the fact that, things that were appropriate 20, 30, 40, 100 years ago just aren't anymore. And if we're to be a global game and to move with the times, I feel that we've got to be braver than just walking away from this.
When we talk about the harmful effects of that and the psychosocial impact, it's directly linked to research that shows that this is negatively attached to stereotypes. And so that is why it's harmful, and that's why we need to consider, it's not just about the fact that there are native tribes in the United States or Canada, because there's actually a community that lives here in the United Kingdom.
These are the things, to break it down into Western culture, these are the things we use in our church. It's not quite the same, but these are the things that are sacred to us. And you wouldn't go and take the cross off an altar in a church and bring it to the match, right? Or to bastardize it first and then bring it to the match and think that's an appropriate thing to do.
More voice could be put to this subject, in which case, do Exeter Chiefs want this every time their name's mentioned to be what people say about them?
If they were trying to decide how to brand now, would they use this imagery? They probably wouldn't, because they have the information. They see where the world is at the minute and the decisions that are being made and the work that's being done around diversity, inclusion and rugby being an inclusive sport.
The Premiership Rugby Union club, Exeter Chiefs, is coming under renewed pressure to stop using Native American imagery in its branding. The National Congress of American Indians has written a letter to the club.
Actually, you have the largest representative body of Native Americans and Alaska Natives now who have been fighting on this issue for well over 40 years are saying, look, this is a problem. We're telling you it's not just a group of people in the UK. It's actual Native Americans themselves.
Premiership rugby side Exeter Chiefs have been told that their Native American-style branding uses a, and I quote, dehumanising stereotype. The National Congress of American Indians has written to the rugby club asking that it stops using Native American imagery.
Chiefs will discuss again whether to change their Native American branding at the club's AGM this week. The board considered the issue last year, taking the view that the use of the Chiefs logo was in fact highly respectful. However, the criticism hasn't gone away, with some calling the branding racist and offensive. Most recently, the largest group representing Native American tribes wrote directly to the club requesting change.
You know, there's a little bit of malevolence in another race determining on our behalf what is good or not good for us. And when they say, oh, what's wrong with you? Why don't you understand that we're honoring you? That is so paternalistic.